My children's favorite word for me had become senile. They'd say it in whispers to each other over the phone, a convenient label for a mother who had become an inconvenience. I often wonder what word they used when they found my two-sentence note, tucked inside the official eviction notice taped to the front door of the house they thought was theirs. Hi everyone. The channel calls me Grandma Agnes. My name is Agnes Covington, and I am 80 years old. I'm speaking to you from my new, bright apartment overlooking a lovely little park in a town where nobody knows my story. A town where I am not a confused old woman, but simply Agnes. This is a story about being erased in plain sight. It's about the quiet, suffocating horror of having the people you love most look right through you, of having your mind and your memories questioned until you begin to question them yourself. It's a secret I've held on to because, to be honest, I was ashamed. They made me ashamed of my own age. But I will not be ashamed any longer. Before I take you back, I want to ask for your support. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your presence here, your willingness to listen, is a powerful reminder that our stories matter, that any age why at any age. It gives me the strength to tell the truth. Thank you, my dears. To understand how I ended up selling my family home out from under my own children, you have to understand the life that was lived within its walls. My story began 55 years ago when I married my husband, Frank Dow. Frank was a brilliant lawyer, a man of integrity and sharp intellect. I was a history professor at the local university. Together, we built a beautiful life. And we built a beautiful house. It wasn't just a house. It was our masterpiece. A sprawling colonial with a big welcoming porch and a garden I tended to for 5 decades. Every corner of that house held a memory. Frank's law books still lined the walls of his study. The pencil marks measuring our children's height were still on the kitchen door frame. It was the heart of our family, the place we hosted every Christmas, every birthday, every milestone. It was a house built not just with wood and nails, but with love, debate, and a lifetime of shared dreams. We raised 2 children there, Robert and Clara. They were good children, raised with every advantage. A stable, loving home, a first-class education, and the unwavering belief that they could achieve anything. Frank and I were a team. He was the brilliant legal mind. I was the one who ran our world. I managed the household, the finances, the investments. I was sharp, organized, and capable. I had to be. Frank always used to laugh and say, "Agnes, you're the CEO of this family. I just work in the legal department." And he was right. I ran our lives with precision and with love. The change began, as it so often does, with a loss. Frank passed away 5 years ago. His heart just gave out. And with his passing, the steady, brilliant light of my life went out. The silence in that big house was a physical weight. But I was not broken. I was grieving, but I was still the capable woman I had always been. I managed the estate. I dealt with the lawyers. I continued to manage my own life. But my children, they began to see me differently. They no longer saw the capable matriarch. They saw a widow, an old woman, a problem to be managed. It all started so slowly, so insidiously, disguised as love and concern. Robert, my son, is a banker, a very practical, numbers-oriented man. A few months after Frank died, he sat me down at the kitchen table. "Mom," he said, his voice full of gentle concern, "you shouldn't have to be worrying about all these bills and investments. It's too much for you right now. Why don't you let me handle the accounts? Just put my name on them so I can help you out." I was tired. I was grieving. And it sounded kind. I trusted him. He was my son. So I agreed. It was the first and biggest mistake of my life. I had willingly handed over the keys to my own independence. Then came Clara, my daughter. She and her family lived just a town over. She started stopping by every day, which was lovely at first. But then she started taking over. "Oh, Mom, you shouldn't be climbing on a stepladder to dust the bookshelves. You could fall," she'd say, taking the duster from my hand. Let's hire a cleaning service. Then, it was the garden. This is too much for you to manage. We'll get a landscaping crew. Every act of help was a subtle removal of my purpose. My life's routines, the small joys I took in caring for my own home, were being systematically dismantled. I was being retired from my own life, without my consent. My home, the place where I had been the CEO, was slowly being turned into a place where I was just a resident. A fragile, elderly resident who needed to be managed, cared for, and as I would soon discover, silenced. They thought they were taking care of me. They had no idea they were just setting the stage for their own downfall. The transition from matriarch to patient was a slow, creeping fog. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in 1,000 tiny, almost imperceptible moments of help and concern that were, in reality, a systematic dismantling of my own agency. At first, it was just little things, moments that made me feel foolish for even being annoyed. The cleaning service Clara hired was perfectly efficient, but they moved my books and knickknacks, and I could never find anything. When I'd get frustrated, Clara would sigh that long-suffering sigh of hers. "Mom, it's in the second drawer now. I told you that last week. Don't you remember?" The phrase "don't you remember" became the new soundtrack of my life. It was a constant, gentle, and utterly devastating assault on my confidence. I had always had a mind like a steel trap. I was a history professor, for goodness sake. My entire life had been built on facts, dates, and details. But when the people you love most in the world start questioning your memory, you start to question it yourself. "Mom, I called yesterday and told you we were coming for dinner at 6, not 5, Robert would say, his voice full of that placating patience that is so much more insulting than anger. "Don't you remember?" Had he? My hand would tremble as I held the phone. I would check my calendar, my notes. Sometimes I was sure he hadn't, but his certainty, Clara's echoing certainty, would make me doubt my own mind. Maybe I had forgotten. I was getting older, after all. Maybe this was just what happened. Then, they began to take over my social life. My friends from the university, my bridge club, they would call, and my children would intercept. "Oh, she's had a long day. I think it's best if she rests," Clara would tell my oldest friend Helen, her voice a syrupy, sweet whisper. I would be sitting right there in the living room, listening, my heart pounding with a helpless fury. The most humiliating incident came with my car. I was a perfectly good driver. I had never had an accident in my life. One afternoon, I was coming home from the grocery store, and there was a small scratch on the rear bumper. I didn't even know how it happened. Someone must have bumped me in the parking lot. Claire saw it. Her face became a mask of theatrical horror. "Mother, what happened? You could have been killed." "It's just a scratch, Clara," I said calmly. But she wouldn't have it. She called Robert. They held a family meeting that night in my own living room, a meeting that I was the subject of, not a participant in. "Mom, we're worried about you," Robert said, in his official banker's voice. "Your reflexes just aren't what they used to be. It's not safe for you to be on the road anymore, for you or for other people." "That's ridiculous," I said, my voice shaking with indignation. "It's a tiny scratch. It's a scratch this time, Mom," Clara said, her eyes welling up with crocodile tears. "What if next time it's a child who runs out into the street? Could you live with yourself?" They had me. How could I argue against the specter of a dead child? Any defense I made would sound selfish and reckless. They weren't just taking my car keys. They were painting me as a public menace. The next day, my car was gone. Robert had arranged for it to be sold. "Just taking care of it for you, Mom," he said, as if he were doing me a favor. And just like that, I was a prisoner. The cleaning service managed my house. The landscaping crew managed my garden. Robert managed my money. And now, without a car, Clara managed my movements. I couldn't go to the library or to lunch with a friend without her express permission and her acting as my chauffeur. My world, which had once been as large as my intellect and my curiosity, had shrunk to the four walls of my house. And in that small, suffocating world, their gaslighting intensified. They started talking to me as if I were a child, using simple words and speaking very, very slowly. If I tried to discuss an article I'd read in the paper or a political debate I'd seen on television, they would exchange a look over my head, a look of pity and concern. "That's nice, Mom," Clara would say, patting my hand. "But don't you worry your head about all that complicated stuff." They were trying to make me senile. They were so convinced of my incompetence that they were actively trying to create it. They spoke of me in the third person, even when I was sitting right there. "She seems a bit more confused today, don't you think?" Robert would whisper to Clara in the hallway. "We need to keep a closer eye on her." I wasn't confused. I was furious. I was suffocating. I felt like I was screaming, but no one could hear me. I was a ghost at my own dining room table. The final, decisive campaign was against the house itself. It started subtly. "This is such a big house for just you, Mom," Clara would say, looking around. "It must be so lonely here, all by yourself." Then, Robert would chime in. "And the upkeep is a fortune. The property taxes, the heating bills. It's a terrible drain on your finances, Mom." Mommy finances that he now controlled, of course. I knew what they were doing. They were laying the groundwork. They wanted to sell the house. My home. Frank's home. The living, breathing heart of my entire life. They wanted to sell it, cash out their inheritance early, and put me in a nice, safe facility where I would be out of sight and out of mind. A problem finally and completely solved. I tried to fight back. "I am not selling this house," I would say, my voice trembling but firm. "I will live here until the day I die. This was your father's wish." And that's when they would pull out their final, most devastating weapon. The word. "Mom," Robert would say, his voice full of a deep, sorrowful pity that was more painful than any shout. "We know you're attached to this place. But you're getting forgetful. You're confused. You're not thinking clearly anymore. You're becoming senile. You're not in a position to make this kind of decision for yourself." Senile. The word was a verdict. A judgment. It was the cage they had been building for me, and now they were trying to lock the door. They were using my own mind as a weapon against me. And the terrifying part was, it was beginning to work. I would lie awake at night, in the dark, silent house, and I would wonder, was I senile? Was I crazy? Were they right? Was my love for my home, my desire for independence, just the confused rambling of a mind that was already gone? The feeling of helplessness was a poison seeping into my soul. I was alone, and I was losing. I had no control over my money, my movements, or even my own reality anymore. They had taken everything, but they had made one crucial, arrogant mistake. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten that the woman they were trying to erase had a mind that was still as sharp as a shard of glass. And they had no idea that their constant talk about selling the house had just planted a seed. An idea, a desperate, terrifying, and utterly brilliant plan for escape. The breaking point, the moment the fog of their gaslighting finally burned away and revealed the cold, hard landscape of their intentions, came on a Tuesday. I overheard Clara on the phone in the hallway, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. She was talking to a real estate agent. "Yes, that's right," she said. "We're looking to list it as soon as possible. But the situation is delicate. My mother is still in the house. She's not well. Very confused. We're in the process of getting power of attorney, but we want to be ready to move the second the papers are signed." Power of attorney. The final nail. The legal maneuver that would officially declare me incompetent, a non-person in the eyes of the law. They weren't just planning to sell my house. They were planning to steal my very identity. They were going to have a doctor, probably a friend of Robert's, declare me senile so they could take everything without my consent. I stood in the shadows of the living room, my hand pressed to my mouth to stifle the gasp that rose in my throat. The betrayal was so absolute, so chillingly methodical, that it almost stopped my heart. They weren't just neglectful children. They were predators, and I was their prey. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear, the doubt, The shame that had been my constant companions for years, they all just vanished. And in their place, a cold, diamond-hard fury ignited. The helpless old woman they thought they had created died in that hallway. And the history professor, the woman who had managed a household and a family with sharp, meticulous precision for 50 years, came roaring back to life. I did not confront them. I did not cry. I did the one thing they no longer expected me to be able to do. I began to think. Clearly. Strategically. They had used my supposed senility as a weapon against me. Fine. I would now use it as my shield, and as my greatest camouflage. My plan was terrifyingly simple, and it relied on them underestimating me completely. I had one advantage they didn't know about. While Robert had control of my main checking and investment accounts, he had forgotten about a small private bank account I had kept for years, an account I had opened after Frank died, to deposit the funds from my university pension. It wasn't a huge amount, but it was enough. It was my escape fund. The next morning, I began my performance. When Clara came over, I pretended to be more confused than ever. I asked her what day it was 3 times. I forgot where the coffee filters were kept, in the same cupboard they had been in for 40 years. I saw the look of pity and triumphant confirmation on her face. It's getting worse, the look said. Well, I need to act quickly. If. Clara, dear, I said, my voice deliberately frail. You know, you and Robert are right. This old house, it's too much for me. I think maybe it's time to sell. The look of shock on her face was a masterpiece. It quickly morphed into one of relieved, condescending joy. Oh, Mom, she said, rushing to hug me. I'm so glad you see that. It's for the best. Don't you worry about a thing. Robert and I will handle everything. There's just one thing, I said, looking down at my hands. I'd like to use a friend. A real estate agent. A woman I used to play bridge with, years ago. Eleanor May. It would make me feel comfortable. I saw a flicker of suspicion in Clara's eyes, but it was quickly extinguished. What harm could it do? An old woman wanted to use her old lady friend. It was probably just another sign of her confusion. Of course, Mom, she said, patting my hand. Whatever makes you happy. They had no idea that Eleanor May wasn't just my old bridge partner. She was a shark. The sharpest, most discreet, and most ruthless real estate agent in the state. And she was fiercely loyal to me. I called Eleanor that afternoon, using the old landline in Frank's study, a phone my children had forgotten even existed. I told her everything. The gaslighting, the power of attorney, the whole sordid story. There was a moment of steely silence on the other end of the line. That blonde witch, Eleanor finally said, her voice like cracking ice. All right, Agnes, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sell this house so fast it will make their heads spin, and they're not going to know a thing about it until the ink is dry. And so began my secret war. While my children were busy meeting with lawyers to have me declared incompetent, I was meeting with Eleanor. We worked with quiet, military precision. Eleanor knew of a developer who had been trying to buy property on my block for years, willing to pay a premium for the land. She made a call. An all-cash offer was on the table within 24 hours. It was a magnificent price. The beauty of my children's plan was that it was also my greatest weapon. They had told everyone, friends, neighbors, their own spouses, that I was senile and confused. So when Eleanor's for sale sign went up in my front yard, and my neighbors asked Clara about it, she just sighed and said, "Oh, you know, Mom, she gets these ideas in her head. We're handling it." They thought it was just another of my episodes. They ignored it. I signed the papers in Eleanor's office. My hand didn't shake. I packed my most precious belongings, my photos, Frank's letters, my mother's jewelry, into a few small suitcases. I arranged for movers to come on the day of the closing. All of it was done in secret, right under their noses. They were so busy plotting my future that they never once stopped to check on my present. They would come over, see me sitting quietly in my armchair, and assume the confused old woman was just sitting. They had no idea I was orchestrating the sale of the very ground beneath their feet. The closing was scheduled for a Friday. The new owners, the developers, were eager to take possession. They wanted the keys by 5 p.m. At 10 a.m. that morning, I went to my bank. I withdrew the proceeds from the sale, a cashier's check for a stunning amount, and I closed the account. I had already arranged for the funds to be deposited in a new private account at a different bank in a different city. My old life was now officially liquidated. I went home to the house that was no longer mine. The movers had already come and gone, taking my suitcases to a new, fully furnished apartment Eleanor had found for me, an apartment my children knew nothing about. The house was empty now, a hollow shell of memories. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do, to walk away from it. But it was the only way. Sometimes, to save yourself, you have to be willing to burn down your own beautiful home. My last act was the note. I took a piece of my best stationery, the one with the elegant monogrammed at the top. My handwriting was as clear and steady as it had ever been. It took me a long time to get the wording just right. I wanted it to be polite. I wanted it to be calm. And I wanted it to be absolutely, devastatingly final. I propped it up on the mantelpiece, right where Frank's portrait used to be. Then I took a deep breath, walked out the front door for the last time, and I did not look back. I had Eleanor tape the official eviction notice, along with a copy of the final bill of sale, to the front door later that afternoon. My children, she told me later, arrived around 6 for dinner, probably to discuss the final stages of their power of attorney application. They saw the legal papers on the door. They saw the official seal, and their world fell apart. They tore the papers down, fumbled with their keys, and burst into the empty, echoing house. And there, on the mantelpiece, they found my note. 2 simple, polite, and perfectly sane sentences. It read, "My dear Robert and Clara, since this house is no longer my own, I'm afraid I cannot host you for dinner this evening. I do hope you find a new place to gather for the holidays." Eleanor told me the scene, as described to her by a gleeful neighbor, was one of pure, theatrical chaos. There was screaming. Clara apparently collapsed into hysterics on the porch, sobbing that I had finally, truly lost my mind. Robert, ever the banker, was a mask of cold, white fury, frantically making phone calls to his lawyer, to the bank, to anyone he thought could undo what had been done. But it was already done. The sale was legal, ironclad, and final. My signature was perfectly lucid. I had acted of my own free will. Their narrative, the story of the senile mother they had so carefully crafted for everyone, had been their own undoing. Who would question the actions of a confused old woman? They had spent months convincing the world I was not of sound mind, and in doing so, they had given me the perfect cover for the sanest act of my life. They tried to find me, of course. They called my old friends. They called distant relatives. But I was a ghost. My new apartment, my new bank account, my new phone number, all of it was a clean slate. I had simply vanished from the life that was trying to suffocate me. The first letter came about a month later, forwarded by Eleanor. It was from Robert. It was not an apology. It was a demand. A 5-page, single-spaced tirade of fury, threats, and accusations. He accused me of being cruel, of being mentally unwell, of robbing them of their rightful inheritance. He demanded that I return the money and commit myself to a proper care facility before I hurt myself or someone else. I read it, and I felt nothing but a distant, clinical pity. He still didn't see me. He only saw a rogue asset that had slipped his control. I tore the letter into small, neat pieces and dropped it in the trash. Clara's letter arrived a week after that. It was different. It was tear-stained and rambling, a jumble of confusion, hurt, and self-pity. "How could you do this to us, Mother?" she wrote. "We were only trying to help you. We loved you. Don't you see that?" And that was the saddest part of all. I think in her own twisted, selfish way, she believed it. She had so thoroughly convinced herself of my incompetence that her actions felt like care, like love. She wasn't a monster. She was just a daughter who had started to see her own mother as a burden and had given herself permission to lighten her load. I didn't reply to either of them. My silence, the silence they had imposed on me for so long, was now my answer. It was a wall they could not breach. And I began to live. For the first time since Frank died, I truly began to live again. I joined a book club at my new local library. I started taking long walks in the park. I made friends, new friends who knew nothing of my past, who only knew me as Agnes, the interesting woman with a sharp mind and a quiet wit. They didn't see a senile old woman. They saw me. And in their eyes, I began to see myself again. I even started volunteering at the local historical society, putting my old professor's mind to work. I felt a sense of purpose I thought I had lost forever. The fog of their gaslighting lifted completely, and I realized my mind was as clear and sharp as it had ever been. I hadn't been losing my memory. I had been losing my will to fight. And now, I had found it again. The lesson in all of this is a painful one, but it is a necessary one. We teach people how to treat us. For years, I had quietly, passively accepted my children's redefinition of me. I had allowed their concern to chip away at my independence and my confidence. I had let them shrink my world until I almost believed I deserved to be in a cage. Their betrayal wasn't in wanting to sell the house. It was in wanting to sell Amadar. My identity, my autonomy, my sanity. They tried to take my story and write their own ending. So I took the book back and I wrote my own. To anyone out there who feels like they are disappearing, who feels like their voice is being silenced by the people who are supposed to love them most, please hear this. You are not what they say you are. Your mind is your own. Your life is your own. Do not let them make you a footnote in the story of your own life. It is never too late to pick up the pen and write a new, surprising, and triumphant final chapter. The first step is the quiet decision to simply stop believing their version of you. Thank you for listening, for allowing me to share my story. Your time and your attention are a gift. Before you go, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It helps more than you know. If you have ever had to fight to be seen, to be heard, please share a piece of your story in the comments below. Every voice that breaks the silence makes it easier for the next one to speak. Love you all. This is Grandma Agnes, and I'll see you in the next story.